If the commander of the battlecruiser Scharnhorst could choose, he would probably prefer to wait out the stormy weather in his safe anchorage in the Norwegian Alt-York. But nothing depended on the desire of Captain Zur C. Fritchen on Christmas evening, December 24, 1943, because the decision to leave his ship in the sea was received at the very top personally by Hitler. Good afternoon, friends. This is his three-phase 3. I wish you a pleasant viewing, battlecruiser, Scharnhorst Praslov, Rosemary, and a lucky ship, as you probably guessed. Like reputation never arises out of nowhere. Having entered service just before the start of the Second World War, this slender, the giant managed to take part in many risky enterprises of the German Navy. Among others, his rumor included successful participation in the Norwegian landing operation and very fruitful 2-month raiding in the waters of the Atlantic. The bottom of the British aircraft carrier Glorious is a case that to this day has no analogues in naval practice. In all the episodes described above, an important, if not decisive, component of successful actions invariably acted, and the high speed of the latter became possible thanks to the engineer prudently Naderi Fash, their ship with a mighty heart. The power plant of the German battlecruiser transmitted to shafts of 160,000 horsepower, providing a far from small ship with a speed of 31 knots. But the Scharnhorst was lucky not only at sea, even being chained to the pier in some incomprehensible way during numerous enemy raids, he always avoided serious damage. The crown of luck of the Germans is considered to be the process server, participating in which a heavy ship, wandering onto an underwater mine, stopped right in the middle of the English Channel, and Horst, abandoned by an escort shant, seemed doomed. However, due to the sluggishness of the enemy and the desperate resistance of the covering fighters, until repairs were completed, none of the British aircraft was able to hit a stationary target in the 42nd year. The main forces of the German surface fleet were hidden, isolated from prying eyes in the fjords along the northern coast of Norway. The squadron, concentrated here by its very presence, forced the anti-Hitler coalition to spend considerable resources to ensure adequate storage for each of the following Murmansk and Arkhangelsk Arctic convoys. With Longley Sava technology for the time being, this state of affairs suited Berlin quite well. However, the changing situation on the Eastern Front forced the leadership of the Kriegsmarine to take more decisive action. The plan was simple, taking advantage of the factor of surprise to intercept and destroy the next transport caravan. If successful, it was quite possible to hope that the cautious enemy will again abandon the most convenient route for a long time, which of course will, to a certain extent, have a negative impact on the offensive impulse of the Red Army. On December 23, 1943, German reconnaissance aircraft discovered convoys, JW-55B, in the Faroe Islands area. According to the report of the pilots, no large warships were seen as part of its escort, and there was nothing more suitable to strike and could not have dreamed of in the evening of the same day, and the Grand Admiral got dressed. The order came to prepare all available forces for departure in order to obtain more complete information. 8 submarines were advanced to the area of the supposed location of the caravan. Their crew was instructed to secretly monitor the enemy, informed about changes in its speed and course. At that time in the north of Norway, in addition to the flotilla of submarines, 2 large surface ships were based, the battlecruiser Scharnhorst and the notorious battleship Tirpitz. However, the latter was recently damaged and could not take part in the planned hunt. So Scharnhorst went on an important mission in company only 5 escort destroyers. The leadership of the campaign was entrusted to the acting commander of the 1st Battle Group, Rear Admiral Erik Bayou, whose flag was raised on the mast of the raider. Friends, it is difficult to convey in words what the Arctic Ocean is like at this time of year. Snowfalls are frequent and are replaced by strong sea waves. Every now and then, a furious storm is quite common here. But for a strong warship, this is not the most dangerous thing. No, much more terrible is the all-consuming darkness. The polar night in these latitudes lasts for as long as 22 hours. making it almost impossible to discharge anything further than its own bow. Even at noon, when the horizon finally flashes as a narrow gray stripe observation light still remains extremely difficult. The sight of rangefinder glass and artillery fire control devices are almost always covered with huge buildups of ubiquitous ice. In such conditions, much, if not all, depends on the intuition of the commander and the vigilance of those looking ahead. Having emerged from their rocky shelter, the ships of the 1st Battle Group headed for north by the morning of the next day. Visibility had dropped so much that Bayou had to form a kind of screen from the destroyers by building them in a line and pushing them about 10 kilometers forward. Horst's chance. In such a formation, the squadron passed about an hour, after which, in order to maximize the search area, the ships had to finally split up. And although the decision was certainly dictated by urgent need, yet it cannot be ignored that it had far-reaching consequences. About 150 meters ahead of the Scharnhorst setting, and a huge column of water suddenly rose from the sea. It became obvious that someone was firing at the battleship. The alarm rang, turning on the radar equipment. The German tried to determine range and characteristics of the target. At that very moment, the ship shuddered twice from direct hits. The first shell did not explode, but the second completely corrupted the forward radar antenna overnight, making the raider half-blind. Based on the observed flashes and the nature of the damage, it could be assumed that Scharnhorst was under fire from at least 2 cruisers, one of which was certainly heavy. Eric Bay turned out to be close to the truth. His offenders were the previously unnoticed squadron of Rear Admiral Robert Barnett, consisting of a pair of light cruisers, Belfast and Sheffield, as well as the heavy cruiser Norfolk. It was the 200mm shells of the latter that hit the armor of the Scharnhorst on the connection Barnett, and following 50 miles south of JW-55B, provided its long-range cover using radar equipment. The British were able to detect the enemy sneaking in the darkness in time and, squeezing everything out of their vehicles, rushed to intercept him. The cruisers arrived just in time, because if not for them, without a doubt, he attacked in less than an hour if allied. The convoy did not want to fight an invisible enemy. Scharnhorst put up a smoke curtain, turned sharply and began to leave at maximum speed. Having an advantage in speed in a stormy sea, the German commander hoped to quickly break away from the annoying guard and then strike at transport from another unprotected country in order do not give the opportunity to track your movements with the help of a direction finder. The stern radar of the Vader, which remained operational, was turned off again, and it seemed the trick was a success. The enemy fire soon really stopped at noon. It began to get light in the first rays of the northern sun. The last doubts it was the enemy in the light of day. The gunners of the German battlecruiser acted much more effectively. The first victim of its 300-kilo shells was my foredeck. The Briton, in a short period of time, received direct hits in the superstructure and the stern gun turret, and only the coordinated actions of its crew during the burning of the magazine allowed to avoid imminent death. The next salvo set Sheffield on fire. Landmines exploded in the immediate vicinity of it, caused significant damage to the vehicles, almost depriving the light cruiser of power. You probably had a question about Robert Ubar. Well, here. After the first collision, we managed to stay on the tail of the faster Scharnhorst, but actually nothing at all. Eric B. could not know. One British radar technology in a short period of time made a huge leap forward, now making it possible to monitor the enemy while remaining at a respectable distance from the latter. When the German ship turned to again try to get closer to the transport convoy, the Barnado squadron again stood in its way. No matter how it was possible to prolong the battle a little longer, the battle cruiser would probably have destroyed the brave but significantly weaker British formation. However, the commander of Scharnhorst had a completely different order. His only task was still the attack JW-55. Therefore, spending precious daylight hours on finishing off secondary storage was considered an unaffordable luxury, and instead, for the second time that day, Scharnhorst made a sharp turn at full speed and left the battlefield. Luck, which had served as a guiding star for so long, betrayed the German ship. Upon reaching the intended area, Scharnhorst found no traces of transport. Soon it got dark again. A snowstorm began. All this, along with disappointing reports from those who were there day in search of German destroyers, forced him to refuse to continue the hunt, giving the order to all forces to begin withdrawing to the Arctic. Black night fell again in the light of the rare stars of the stormy sky. The stately ship was barely visible. It seemed that no one and nothing could break through this veil. Suddenly it was filled with many bright lights, and already after. In an instant, a real lead barrage fell on the raiders' armor. Launched in a hurry, the radar showed the rear admiral a terrifying picture on the green field of the locator along the perimeter of Scharnhorst. There were many luminous points indicating enemy warships. The largest were located strictly on course at a distance of about 10,000 meters. Thus it turned out to be a raider. Walked straight into the trap while the heavy ships performed another turn of the day from its various parts. Reports were continuously received about more and more damage. This time, the main enemy was Scharnhorst. He was much more dangerous. The battleship, His Majesty the Duke of York. The battleship was the flagship of the commander of the Metropolitan Fleet, Admiral Cheese Bruce Austin Fraser, the composition of his formation. In addition to the above-mentioned heavyweight, included the light cruiser Jamaica and 4 destroyers. History is silent about how exactly Admiral Fraser became aware of the intended exit of the German squadron to the sea. Perhaps secret data was received from the Norwegian resistance, and the lady encrypted by radio intelligence received a report Cheese Fraser as soon as possible terms developed a cunning plan. The main role in it was assigned to Barnett's squadron, which was charged with occupying the high-speed enemy for as long as possible. This was necessary so that the formation with the battleship at the head left its anchorage at the northern tip of Iceland and managed to reach the intended rendezvous point for Scharnhorst. He settled in a position between him and its base, eventually came out of nowhere. The Duke of York, with the second salvo, already covered the target. The shell hit the starboard side of the turret and completely disabled it. The next 2 times it exploded in the center. You are beautiful at the word of anti-aircraft guns at that moment. Except for the battleship Scharnhorst, you shot light cruisers, Belfast and Jamaica, and also battered in previous battles, Norfolk. It must be said that despite all the surprise of the attack, numerous hits of different calibers that remained combat-ready German towers in less than 5 minutes responded with surprisingly accurate fire. I hope to penetrate the thick armor of the opponent. Eric Gay expected to make it difficult aiming at the enemy battleship during the next 20 minutes of fierce firefights. The German gunners achieved at least 10 close explosions and 3 direct hits on the flagship of the milling Machines, which, however, did not bring noticeable destruction to the Duke York. Having completed the turn, the Shanker began to quickly break away. The damaged ship again demonstrated its high seaworthiness. I think it will be enough to say that the speed of the fugitive in the stormy sea was such that it did not even allow the destroyers that were chasing after him to get closer. However, when the distance between him and the enemy increased to 18 kilometers, a powerful explosion thundered in the engine room of the Giant. A 356 projectile was fired at the radar guidance. It was from which battleship it hit the most vulnerable spot, speed the chance of force, then instantly fell, making the raider absolutely helpless against the torpedoes fired at him. In the first attack, 4 destroyers took part. Your attack, as in a porn textbook, from each side of the target reached 4 TNT fish. The Germans snapped from the secondary weapon, damaging one of the British ships. To everyone's amazement, a battle cruiser engulfed in fire as if ignoring the damage received. It again made 22 knots. However, it was already on the moon. Scharnhorst almost did not listen to the steering wheel from the radio room of the guns. Well, the last radiogram from Scharnhorst to the ground was gone. We will fight to the end over the next 10 minutes. It crashed into the side and 7 more torpedoes. It's hard to say exactly when Raider went underwater. Not one of the ships taking part in the battles did not observe this moment, which was the reason for the confusion that arose because of this, which delayed the start of the rescue operation for more than an hour. This hitch cost the lives of almost all German sailors. When the destroyers approached from 1,900 crew members with 2 emergency plot of only 36 people were removed. among whom there was not a single officer, according to the surviving sailors, the entire command staff of the battlecruiser voluntarily handing over their life jackets. The sailor chose to share the fate of the sinking ship when, after refueling in the Soviet Union, the British squadron, returning home, passed the site of a recent battle, advertising towards a stronger enemy. He will command him as valiantly as Scharnhorst commanded that evening. He is friends once again. Happy holidays to you, coming and past. Thanks for watching, and we will hear from you again very soon.
Our team has taken the lead. All stations, concentrate fire on the target. Our victory is in sight. Our victory is in sight.
Autopilot mode enabled.
Engine boost activated.